23 Black R&B legends who we learned lessons about after they died. Fame doesn't warn you before it takes everything. Behind the sold-out shows, timeless songs, and standing ovations, some of the greatest Black legends were living stories far darker than the world ever imagined. What lessons were hidden until after they were gone? What truths only surfaced when the spotlight finally turned off? Tonight, we're pulling back the curtain on lives you thought you knew. These aren't rumors. These are real moments history waited too long to reveal. Watch closely and ask yourself, does greatness protect you or does it cost more? Natalie Cole. Natalie Cole lived a life defined by both inheritance and resistance. Born into one of the most celebrated musical families in American history, she carried the weight of her father, Nat King Cole's legacy from childhood. Yet her journey was never about imitation. It was about survival inside a spotlight that magnified every weakness and mistake. By the late 1970s, Natalie's rapid rise brought not only fame, but isolation. Touring schedules were relentless, and the pressure to prove herself independent from her father's shadow intensified. Substance dependence became a coping mechanism rather than rebellion. What began as an escape quietly evolved into a medical crisis that would follow her for decades. From 1982 to 1985, she stepped away from the industry almost entirely, entering rehabilitation and attempting to rebuild her life away from public scrutiny. Although she returned stronger and achieved major career milestones, including multiple Grammy Awards, her body carried the cost. Years later, she was diagnosed with idiopathic pulmonary arterial hypertension, a rare and progressive disease that restricts blood flow to the lungs. In 2009, after prolonged dialysis, she underwent a kidney transplant. Despite severe physical limitations, Natalie continued performing, often concealing exhaustion behind professionalism and poise. Behind the scenes, hospitals replaced hotels and treatments replaced rehearsals. Yet she refused to present herself as fragile. Music remained her anchor, not as spectacle, but as continuity. Her performances in later years were measured, deliberate, and emotionally restrained, reflecting an artist aware of her limits. Natalie Cole died on December 31st, 2015, at age 65. Her passing was quiet, absent the spectacle that once defined her life. Her story reflects a painful truth behind celebrity culture. Resilience is often invisible, and recovery does not erase consequence. Natalie's legacy is not only her voice, but her refusal to surrender identity to either privilege or collapse. She proved that endurance, not perfection, defines longevity. Aretha Franklin. Aretha Franklin was not simply a singer, she was an institution. Crowned the Queen of Soul, her voice carried authority, vulnerability, and power in equal measure. With 18 Grammy Awards and more than 75 million records sold, Aretha shaped the sound of American music for over 5 decades. Yet behind that commanding presence lived a woman whose final chapter revealed lessons rarely discussed while she was alive. Despite her immense success, Aretha's personal life remained fragmented. Multiple marriages ended in separation, leaving emotional scars that never fully healed. While her career soared, stability remained elusive. According to verified records, she also struggled with severe financial mismanagement. At the time of her death in 2018, court documents revealed she owed the IRS close to $8 million in unpaid taxes, a shock to fans who assumed wealth guaranteed security. Her passing from pancreatic cancer exposed deeper complications. Aretha left no formal will, triggering years of legal conflict among her children after handwritten documents were discovered in her home. The estate battle became public, contrasting sharply with the dignity she embodied on stage. These disputes delayed closure and overshadowed mourning, turning a private loss into a public reckoning. Yet reducing Aretha's story to debt or legal turmoil misses the larger truth. She remained fiercely independent, often refusing industry advice, contracts, or interference. That autonomy empowered her artistry but complicated her personal affairs. Her music, songs like Respect and A Natural Woman, endures as cultural landmarks precisely because they were rooted in lived experience. Aretha Franklin's life teaches a difficult lesson. Greatness does not erase vulnerability. Her legacy is not diminished by the struggles revealed after her death. It is humanized. She remains a reminder that icons are not immune to consequence, and that strength often coexists with unresolved fragility. Otis Redding. Otis Redding's career burned briefly, but with an intensity that few artists ever achieve. By age 26, he had already reshaped soul music with a voice that blended raw emotion and restrained power. Songs like Try a Little Tenderness and Respect positioned him as a defining force of the 1960s. Yet the lesson of Otis Redding's life emerged not through longevity, but through sudden absence. On December 10, 1967, Otis boarded a small aircraft bound for Madison, Wisconsin, carrying demo recordings for what he believed would be his next creative evolution. Among them was Sittin' on the Dock of the Bay, recorded just days earlier. The song was unfinished, its iconic whistling left as a placeholder. The plane crashed into the icy waters of Lake Monona, killing Otis and 5 others. He was the only member of the band to perish. In the aftermath, the world learned that Otis was quietly preparing to step away from traditional soul arrangements. Unreleased tapes revealed a more introspective, minimalist direction, slower tempos, reflective lyrics, and emotional restraint. His death froze that evolution in time. When Dock of the Bay was released posthumously, it became the first song by a deceased artist to top the Billboard Hot 100, transforming a demo into a farewell. Financial records later showed Otis left behind a modest estate, no formal will, and a young family. His influence, however, far exceeded his years. Artists across genres cite him as foundational, not because of volume, but because of authenticity. Otis Redding's story teaches that impact is not measured by duration. Sometimes a voice arrives, changes everything, and leaves before it can explain itself. His silence became the final lesson, unfinished, unresolved, and unforgettable. Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson was not just a global superstar, he was a cultural phenomenon whose influence reshaped music, dance, and celebrity itself. With more than 400 million records sold worldwide and 13 Grammy Awards, he reached a level of fame few humans have ever known. Yet the lesson revealed after his death is that extreme success can coexist with extreme fragility. In his final years, Michael's body was under severe strain. Medical records and court testimony later confirmed that he suffered from chronic insomnia, physical exhaustion, and dependency on prescription medications. Despite preparing for the ambitious This Is It tour, 50 shows sold out in hours, he weighed barely 112 pounds at the time of his death. The public image of strength concealed a man functioning on the edge of collapse. On June 25, 2009, Michael died in a rented Los Angeles mansion due to acute propofol intoxication administered by his personal physician. The death was ruled homicide, and the subsequent trial exposed the dangerous medical practices that sustained his final months. Investigators also uncovered hundreds of unreleased songs, proving that even in decline, Michael remained creatively driven. Financially, the picture was equally complex. Though immensely valuable on paper, his estate was burdened by hundreds of millions of dollars in debt. He owned no permanent home at the time of his death, and his catalog was leveraged to maintain liquidity. Only after his passing did financial restructuring restore stability to his legacy. Michael Jackson's story offers a sobering lesson. Global adoration does not guarantee protection. His brilliance endured, but his physical and emotional limits were ignored until they failed. The king of pop did not fall from irrelevance. He collapsed under the weight of expectation, isolation, and relentless demand. Donna Summer. Donna Summer ruled the disco era with elegance and authority. Known as the Queen of Disco, she sold over 100 million records, and earned 5 Grammy Awards, shaping a genre that defined an entire decade. Her music was vibrant, confident, and explosive. Yet the lesson revealed after her death was how quietly suffering can unfold behind even the brightest sound. In 2012, Donna died from lung cancer at age 63, despite being a lifelong non-smoker. Her family publicly stated that they believed prolonged exposure to toxic dust following the September 11th attacks contributed to her illness. Donna had lived and worked near Ground Zero and later developed deep anxiety about environmental exposure, withdrawing from public life for extended periods. Unlike many artists who fought illness publicly, Donna chose privacy. She continued recording in isolation, moving away from disco toward introspective, stripped-down compositions. Her final sessions were quiet and unfinished, reflecting an artist turning inward rather than outward. Music became reflection, not performance. Friends described her final years as emotionally complex. While she remained spiritually grounded, fear and uncertainty shaped her routines. Curtains drawn, travel reduced, and public appearances limited, Donna lived far from the spotlight that once followed her everywhere. Donna Summer's death surprised the world because it contradicted her image. She was energy, movement, and joy, yet her final chapter was subdued and solitary. Her story teaches a vital lesson. Illness does not announce itself according to reputation. Even icons who define celebration can fade in silence. Donna's legacy endures not only in dance floors, but in the reminder that strength is often quiet and suffering is not always visible. James Ingram. James Ingram was a voice defined by warmth, control, and emotional precision. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, his vocals became the backbone of modern R&B, powering timeless duets like Baby, Come to Me, and Ya Mo Be There. With 2 Grammy Awards and multiple Oscar-nominated songs, Ingram stood at the center of American popular music. Yet his final lesson emerged through the quiet dignity of his departure. In stark contrast to the spectacle that often surrounds celebrity illness, James chose privacy. He was diagnosed with glioblastoma multiforme, the most aggressive form of brain cancer, a disease with a median survival rate measured in months. Only his immediate family knew. As the cancer progressed, it began to erode his memory, vision, and motor control, devastating symptoms for a musician whose life depended on recall and precision. Still, James refused to be defined by decline. He continued writing and recording as long as physically possible, scaling back appearances without explanation. There were no farewell tours, no interviews framed around sympathy. According to close friends, he believed the music should speak, not the illness. Even when reading lyrics required magnification and headaches became constant, he remained creatively present. James Ingram died on January 29, 2019, at age 66. His death surprised fans because he had never announced his struggle. In retrospect, his silence was intentional. His legacy teaches a rare lesson in an era of overexposure. Strength does not require performance. James Ingram left the world the same way he lived in it, measured, graceful, and focused on the work rather than the wound. Whitney Houston. Whitney Houston possessed one of the most powerful voices in recorded history. With more than 200 million records sold and 6 Grammy Awards, she set a standard that reshaped vocal performance across generations. Her image suggested perfection, flawless tone, effortless range, global dominance. Yet the truth revealed after her death was how profoundly that perfection concealed pain. On February 11, 2012, Whitney was found unresponsive in a bathtub at the Beverly Hilton Hotel. The coroner ruled her death an accidental drowning, with heart disease and substance use as contributing factors. Medical reports later revealed severe physical deterioration, an enlarged heart, extensive cardiovascular damage, and a body weakened by years of dependency. These were not sudden failures. but cumulative consequences. What shocked the public further were revelations that emerged years later. Documentaries and testimonies disclosed childhood trauma and abuse that Whitney never openly discussed during her lifetime. Those experiences, combined with relentless pressure and an unstable marriage, formed a cycle of self-medication and emotional withdrawal. Fame amplified the struggle rather than healing it. Financially, her estate had been heavily depleted, with an estimated fortune of over $100 million, largely exhausted by the time of her death. The contrast between global success and private collapse forced a cultural reckoning with how celebrity suffering is often consumed rather than addressed. Whitney Houston's legacy remains untouchable musically, but her life delivers a painful lesson. Talent does not shield the soul. Her story is not one of weakness, but of untreated wounds hidden behind expectation. The voice that lifted millions was, in the end, unable to rescue its owner. And that truth continues to echo long after the final note. Sam Cooke. Sam Cooke was more than a legendary soul singer. He was a visionary who understood power long before the industry was ready to share it. With a voice that blended gospel roots and pop elegance, he delivered classics like You Send Me and A Change Is Gonna Come, shaping both music and cultural consciousness. His true revolution, however, unfolded behind the scenes. Cooke was among the first Black artists to demand ownership, founding his own publishing and record labels at a time when Black musicians were routinely exploited. That independence made him influential, but also isolated. He challenged segregation openly, refused demeaning contracts, and insisted on creative control. These decisions elevated him financially and politically, but they also placed him under scrutiny. On December 11, 1964, Sam Cooke died at age 33 after being shot at a Los Angeles motel. Authorities ruled the death justifiable homicide within days, a conclusion that immediately sparked doubt. Inconsistencies, rushed investigations, and the absence of a full autopsy fueled questions that persist decades later. Prominent figures, including family members and fellow artists, publicly rejected the official narrative. At the time of his death, Cooke was at the height of his influence. He had recently recorded A Change Is Gonna Come, a song inspired by personal experiences with racism. Released posthumously, it became an anthem of the civil rights movement, cementing his place in history. Sam Cooke's story teaches a sobering lesson. Progress often carries risk. His voice promised hope, but his life revealed the cost of defiance. He did not live to see the change he sang about, yet his courage helped move it forward. Tammy Terrell. Tammy Terrell's career shone brightly but briefly, leaving behind a legacy shaped as much by loss as by talent. Known for her radiant voice and chemistry with Marvin Gaye, she defined romantic soul through hits like Ain't No Mountain High Enough. Behind that joyful sound, however, was a young woman enduring relentless physical and emotional strain. Tammy's health began deteriorating in her early 20s. She suffered persistent headaches, dizziness, and fatigue, symptoms initially dismissed or minimized. In 1967, she collapsed on stage during a performance, an incident that led doctors to diagnose a malignant brain tumor. Over the next 2 years, she underwent 8 brain surgeries, each one weakening her body while her music continued circulating without her presence. Despite her condition, Motown continued releasing recordings under her name, often reusing earlier vocals. Tammy herself was largely removed from public view, confined to hospitals and recovery rooms. The industry celebrated the sound while the person behind it faded from sight. Tammy Terrell died on March 16, 1970, at just 24 years old. Her funeral drew immense grief from peers, especially Marvin Gaye, who withdrew from performing for an extended period afterward. Her death exposed how easily young artists, especially women, could be consumed by systems prioritizing output over care. Tammy's story delivers a painful lesson. Talent alone does not guarantee protection. Her voice lives on, But her life reminds us that vulnerability, when ignored, can silence even the brightest promise far too soon. Donny Hathaway. Donny Hathaway was one of the most gifted musicians of his generation, a songwriter and vocalist whose work blended intellect, vulnerability, and spiritual depth. Songs like A Song for You and This Christmas revealed an emotional clarity that felt almost prophetic. Yet the lesson revealed after his death is how brilliance can be undermined when mental health goes unrecognized and unsupported. Behind the music, Donny struggled with severe psychiatric illness. Medical records and eyewitness accounts confirm he experienced paranoia, hallucinations, and delusional beliefs, including fears that he was being monitored or controlled. At a time when mental health awareness was limited and stigmatized, especially for Black men, his condition was misunderstood, minimized, or ignored by those around him. Despite moments of stability, his symptoms intensified during recording sessions and tours. He would abruptly leave studios, become suspicious of collaborators, or withdraw entirely. Friends recalled long periods of silence followed by bursts of clarity. Donny himself reportedly understood something was wrong, but consistent treatment remained elusive. On January 13, 1979, Donny Hathaway died after falling from the 15th floor of the Essex House Hotel in New York City. He was 33 years old. Authorities ruled the death an accident, though questions have lingered due to the circumstances surrounding his mental state. What is undisputed is that his life ended amid untreated suffering rather than lack of talent or purpose. Donny Hathaway's legacy teaches a critical lesson. Artistic genius does not replace medical care. His voice continues to comfort millions, yet his story reminds us that creativity without support can become a burden instead of a gift. His silence at the end was not failure. It was a warning history learned too late. Etta James. Etta James lived with an intensity that matched her voice. From At Last to I'd Rather Go Blind, she delivered performances rooted in truth, struggle, and survival. Her career spanned more than 5 decades, earning 6 Grammy Awards and universal respect. But the lesson revealed after her death is how prolonged trauma and addiction can quietly unravel even the strongest spirit. Etta battled substance dependence for much of her life, a struggle she openly acknowledged in later years. Repeated rehabilitation attempts brought periods of recovery, but relapses followed. Medical records confirm long-term health complications, including kidney disease, leukemia, and dementia. Pain management became increasingly complex, and prescription medications further strained her stability. In her final years, Etta's health deteriorated rapidly. She was frequently hospitalized, physically weakened, and emotionally isolated. Reports confirmed significant family conflict over her estate while she was still alive, deepening her distress. Despite immense influence, she faced her decline with limited support and privacy rather than ceremony. Etta James died on January 20th, 2012, at age 73. While early reports emphasized leukemia, later confirmations clarified that multiple chronic conditions contributed to her passing. The public celebration of her music contrasted sharply with the turbulence of her final chapter. Etta's story teaches an uncomfortable truth. Authenticity often comes at a cost. Her music remains timeless because it carried lived pain, not polish. Yet her life reminds us that honesty without healing can exhaust the soul. Etta James did not fail, she endured. And in that endurance, she left behind a legacy that is both triumphant and cautionary. Phyllis Hyman. Phyllis Hyman possessed a voice of rare elegance, controlled, expressive, and emotionally restrained in a way that invited listeners closer rather than overwhelming them. Trained in classical music and jazz, she stood apart in an era dominated by louder personas. Her recordings suggested calm confidence, yet the lesson revealed after her death was how profoundly internal struggle can exist beneath apparent composure. Throughout her career, Phyllis battled chronic depression and bipolar disorder, conditions confirmed by medical professionals and those closest to her. Touring schedules, label pressure, and financial instability intensified her symptoms. Despite critical acclaim and chart success, she struggled to maintain consistent support systems, often finding herself isolated at the very moments when her career seemed most visible. By the early 1990s, her health had deteriorated alongside mounting debt. Friends later confirmed that she feared becoming physically dependent due to long-term medication and illness. On June 30th, 1995, Phyllis died by suicide just one day before her 46th birthday. Investigations confirmed no foul play. The tragedy shocked fans who associated her music with serenity and control. In the aftermath, her final note, "I'm tired," became emblematic of untreated mental illness rather than weakness. Phyllis left behind a catalog that remains influential precisely because of its emotional honesty. Her story teaches a critical lesson. Refinement can mask distress, and talent does not negate the need for care. Phyllis Hyman's legacy endures as both inspiration and warning. She showed the world how to sing pain without spectacle, but the silence surrounding her suffering reminds us that beauty does not equal safety, and elegance does not guarantee survival. Betty Wright. Betty Wright entered the music industry as a prodigy and left it as a pillar. Recording her first hit at age 13, she built a career defined by longevity, adaptability, and independence. Known for songs like "Clean Up Woman," she combines streetwise storytelling with vocal precision. Yet the lesson revealed after her death was how quietly a life of contribution can end without the recognition it deserves. Unlike many peers, Betty navigated the industry with caution. She co-founded her own label, advocated for artist ownership, and mentored younger performers, including Gloria Estefan and Joss Stone. Despite her influence, she often operated behind the scenes, choosing sustainability over spectacle. In her later years, Betty battled cancer, a diagnosis she kept largely private. Even while undergoing treatment, she continued working, producing, mentoring, and advising emerging artists. Her illness progressed during a period when public attention was focused elsewhere, resulting in minimal media coverage at the time of her passing. Betty Wright died on May 10, 2020, at age 66. The timing, amid a global pandemic, meant tributes were subdued and public mourning limited. Yet her impact remains embedded in modern R&B, not through scandal or tragedy, but through steady contribution. Her story offers a different lesson than many legends. Not all greatness burns loudly. Some endures quietly, shaping generations without demanding applause. Betty Wright's legacy lives in the voices she guided, the artists she protected, and the proof that influence does not require constant visibility. Bill Withers. Bill Withers built a legacy by doing what many artists refuse to do: walking away. Known for timeless songs like "Ain't No Sunshine," "Lean on Me," and "Lovely Day," Withers proved that restraint could be as powerful as ambition. His music felt universal because it was grounded in ordinary experience rather than spectacle. The lesson revealed after his death is that integrity sometimes requires choosing silence over success. Despite winning 3 Grammy Awards and selling millions of records, Withers grew increasingly frustrated with industry control. Conflicts with record executives over creative direction and marketing led him to retreat from the spotlight in the mid-1980s. At the height of public demand, he stopped recording entirely, refusing to dilute his voice or compromise his standards. Few artists have ever made that choice, and fewer still survived it with dignity intact. After leaving music, Withers lived a deliberately private life, supporting his family and engaging only selectively with the public. He resisted nostalgia tours and avoided celebrity culture, believing that art should not be endlessly recycled for profit. His withdrawal was often misread as bitterness, but those close to him described clarity and peace rather than regret. Bill Withers died in 2020 at age 81 from heart-related complications. The reaction to his passing revealed how deeply his work had embedded itself into daily life. His songs were sung at protests, funerals, weddings, and quiet moments of reflection, proof that relevance does not require constant presence. Wither's story teaches a rare lesson. Longevity can be measured by influence, not output. He showed that leaving early does not diminish legacy. Sometimes it preserves it. Bobby Womack. Bobby Womack's music carried urgency, conflict, and confession. From his early work with Sam Cooke to solo hits like Across 11th Street, he channeled lived experience into sound. His voice felt restless because his life was. The lesson revealed after his death is how personal chaos can fuel art while quietly dismantling the artist. Womack's career was marked by turbulence, public scandals, volatile relationships, and periods of creative brilliance interrupted by decline. In later years, his health deteriorated sharply. He was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, a cruel irony for a songwriter whose power rested in memory and narrative. As the illness progressed, he lost recall of lyrics and moments that once defined him. Compounding this were financial strain and lingering addiction issues. Even as younger artists rediscovered and celebrated his work, Bobby struggled to maintain stability. Friends recalled moments of clarity followed by confusion, determination followed by withdrawal. The man who could articulate emotional truth on record found himself increasingly disconnected from his own history. Bobby Womack died in 2014 at age 70. Tributes highlighted his influence across genres, from soul and R&B to hip-hop, but they also acknowledge the cost of a life lived without pause. His story does not invite judgment, it demands understanding. Womack's legacy teaches a difficult lesson. Authenticity can be both gift and burden. His music endures because it never pretended, yet his life reminds us that expression without protection can leave artists exposed long after the final note fades. Vesta Williams. Vesta Williams was a powerhouse vocalist whose talent far exceeded the recognition she received. Emerging in the mid-1980s, she became a defining voice in contemporary R&B with hits like Congratulations and Once Bitten, Twice Shy. Her music reflected confidence and resilience, yet the lesson revealed after her death was how unforgiving the industry can be to artists once commercial momentum fades. Despite critical acclaim and chart success, Vesta's career slowed as industry priorities shifted. Record label support weakened, promotional budgets shrank, and opportunities became scarce. Like many artists of her era, she faced the harsh reality of being quietly sidelined rather than openly dismissed. Financial instability followed, creating emotional strain that compounded professional frustration. In the years leading up to her death, Vesta battled depression and anxiety. She also struggled with substance dependence, a challenge she attempted to manage privately rather than publicly. Friends later described a woman oscillating between hope for a comeback and exhaustion from years of being overlooked. While she continued recording independently, the absence of institutional support made sustainability difficult. Vesta Williams died in 2011 at age 54 from heart failure. Her passing shocked fans who had never associated her voice with vulnerability. Only afterward did many learn how isolated her final years had become. Tributes poured in from fellow artists who acknowledged her influence and questioned why she had been allowed to fade without protection. Vesta's story delivers a sobering lesson. Talent alone does not guarantee security. Her legacy challenges the industry's habit of celebrating artists only at their peak, while neglecting them in transition. Her voice remains strong on record, but her life reminds us that brilliance requires care long after the charts move on. Luther Vandross. Luther Vandross was the gold standard of romantic R&B. His voice, smooth, controlled, and emotionally precise, defined intimacy for generations. With 8 Grammy Awards and more than 40 million records sold, Luther's career appeared flawless. Yet the lesson revealed after his death was how carefully he guarded his private life, even at great personal cost. Luther lived with intense scrutiny. His weight, personal relationships, and sexuality were constant subjects of speculation. Rather than confront rumor, he chose silence. This decision preserved his artistry, but deepened isolation. Friends later revealed that Luther valued privacy above explanation, believing the music should speak where he would not. In 2003, Luther suffered a massive stroke that left him partially paralyzed and unable to speak clearly. The incident abruptly ended his career and exposed how unprepared the industry was to support artists once performance became impossible. Rehabilitation was long and difficult, requiring constant medical care and supervision. Luther Vandross died in 2005 at age 54. In the aftermath, tributes celebrated his catalog, but also revealed how alone he had become. Few knew the full extent of his daily struggle after the stroke. The public learned that behind the perfection was a man who bore pressure quietly rather than publicly. Luther's story teaches a powerful lesson. Privacy can be protective, but it can also isolate. His legacy remains unmatched musically, yet his life invites reflection on how society treats vulnerability, especially in men expected to embody emotional strength without ever needing it themselves. Gerald Levert. Gerald Levert carried soul music in his blood and urgency in his voice. As the son of Eddie Levert of the OJs, he inherited both legacy and expectation. Yet he forged a distinct path defined by emotional honesty and raw intensity. With LSG and a successful solo career, Gerald became known for songs that confronted love, regret, and vulnerability without disguise. The lesson revealed after his death is how quietly pressure can accumulate behind consistent success. By the early 2000s, Gerald was managing relentless schedules, recording, touring, producing, often while dealing with chronic pain and anxiety. Medical reports later confirmed he relied on multiple prescription medications to manage discomfort and sleep. The combination, taken as prescribed but dangerously interacting, would prove fatal. On November 10, 2006, Gerald Levert died at age 40 from acute intoxication caused by mixed prescription drugs. The shock came not only from his age, but from the absence of warning signs presented to the public. Gerald had just released new music and appeared professionally stable. The tragedy highlighted a systemic issue within the industry: the normalization of exhaustion and medicated endurance. His family pursued legal accountability, later reaching a settlement with the prescribing physician, an acknowledgement that oversight failed where care was required. Gerald's death forced a reckoning about how pain is managed in high-demand careers. His catalog remains powerful because it never hid emotional strain. Yet his life revealed how physical suffering often goes unaddressed until it is irreversible. Gerald Levert's legacy teaches that wellness cannot be postponed for productivity. Talent may endure, but the body keeps its own count, and it does not negotiate. Rick James. Rick James lived without moderation. As a pioneer of funk, he fused rebellion, sexuality, and spectacle into a sound that dominated the late 1970s and 1980s. With hits like Super Freak and Give It To Me Baby, Rick became synonymous with excess. The lesson revealed after his death is that indulgence, when unchallenged, eventually consumes the freedom it celebrates. Behind the bravado was a life marked by escalating substance abuse. Cocaine addiction dominated Rick's adult years, fueling erratic behavior and repeated legal trouble. In the early 1990s, he served prison time for assault, an event that interrupted his career and exposed how far control had slipped. Attempts at recovery followed, but consistency remained elusive. In his final years, Rick's health deteriorated significantly. Medical records confirmed diabetes, heart disease, and kidney complications. Conditions worsened by long-term drug use. Though he attempted a comeback, physical limitations replaced the stamina that once defined him. Financial strain and isolation compounded the decline, leaving little margin for recovery. Rick James died in 2004 at age 56 from heart failure. Toxicology reports showed multiple substances in his system, though none at lethal levels individually, underscoring cumulative damage rather than a single cause. Public reaction oscillated between celebration of his music and judgment of his lifestyle. Rick James's story teaches a hard truth. Rebellion without boundaries is not liberation. His influence on music remains undeniable, but his life serves as a cautionary tale about how unchecked excess erodes the very power it seeks to express. His legacy is loud, unforgettable, and instructive. Marvin Gaye. Marvin Gaye's music asked questions many artists avoided. With albums that fused intimacy and social reflection, he turned soul into a vehicle for conscience. Yet the lesson revealed after his death is not simply about artistry. It is about how unresolved trauma can circle back with devastating force. Raised in a home defined by fear and contradiction, Marvin carried emotional wounds long before fame arrived. Success amplified sensitivity rather than soothing it. As pressures mounted, creative disputes, financial strain, and substance dependence, his internal balance grew fragile. Friends describe cycles of retreat and resolve, moments of clarity interrupted by deep anxiety. The same empathy that shaped his songs left him vulnerable to overwhelm. In the early 1980s, Marvin sought isolation as protection. He reduced public appearances and struggled to find stability, even as his influence remained immense. On April 1st, 1984, one day before his 45th birthday, Marvin was shot and killed by his father during a domestic confrontation. The tragedy shocked the world not only for its violence, but for what it revealed about long-standing family conflict that fame had never healed. After his death, listeners returned to his catalog with new understanding. Songs once heard as romantic or political now sounded like self-portraits, pleas for peace, safety, and understanding. Marvin's story teaches a sobering lesson. Awareness does not equal resolution. Insight can illuminate pain without removing it. Marvin Gaye's legacy endures as a reminder that tenderness needs protection. His voice changed music forever, but his life urges us to take emotional health as seriously as creative genius, before reflection turns into regret. Aaliyah. Aaliyah's career moved with effortless momentum. With a sound that blended restraint, confidence, and modernity, she redefined R&B for a new generation. By her early 20s, she had achieved crossover success in music and film, signaling a future built on evolution rather than repetition. The lesson revealed after her death is how fragile progress can be when safety is treated as secondary. On August 25, 2001, Aaliyah died in a plane crash in the Bahamas after filming a music video. Investigations confirmed that the aircraft was overloaded and piloted by an individual who was not qualified to fly it. These facts shifted the narrative from accident to preventable failure, one rooted in haste, cost-cutting, and disregard for protocol. Aaliyah was only 22. At the time, she was transitioning into film roles and preparing new music that suggested a broader artistic range. Unreleased material and industry plans revealed a career poised for long-term impact. Her death halted that trajectory instantly, leaving questions not about what went wrong creatively, but what went wrong operationally. In the years that followed, fans learned more about the pressures young artists face behind the scenes: tight schedules, limited authority, and decisions made by others with disproportionate power. Aaliyah's passing became a case study in accountability within entertainment logistics. Aaliyah's legacy remains luminous because it is unfinished. She represents potential interrupted, not by risk taken for art, but by negligence tolerated for speed. Her story teaches a crucial lesson: talent deserves protection. Progress means nothing if the systems surrounding it fail to value life over convenience. Teddy Pendergrass. Teddy Pendergrass redefined masculine vulnerability in soul music. With a voice that blended command and tenderness, he became one of the most influential R&B performers of the late 1970s, selling out arenas and reshaping how intimacy could sound on record. His rise was meteoric, and so was the turn that followed, revealing a lesson about resilience forged under irreversible change. In 1982, Teddy survived a catastrophic car accident that left him paralyzed from the chest down. The injury ended his ability to perform as he once had and forced an abrupt recalibration of identity. For an artist whose power lived in physical presence, the loss was profound. Recovery brought not only medical challenges, but psychological reckoning. How to remain an artist when the body no longer cooperates. What followed was not retreat, but reinvention. Teddy returned to music with a new urgency, focusing on studio work, songwriting, and vocals shaped by restraint rather than spectacle. Albums released after the accident carried a quieter authority, less bravado, more reflection. He also became an advocate for disability awareness, insisting on visibility without pity. Privately, the transition demanded endurance. Relationships changed, routines narrowed, and independence required constant planning. Yet Teddy refused to be framed as diminished. He measured success by continuity, by staying present, productive, and honest. When he died in 2010 at age 59, tributes emphasize courage, but the deeper lesson lies in discipline, adapting without surrender. Teddy Pendergrass's legacy teaches that strength is not the absence of loss. It is the refusal to let loss define the final chapter. His voice did not disappear, it evolved, proving that artistry can survive when circumstances demand everything but excuses. Ray Charles. Ray Charles changed American music by collapsing borders between sacred and secular, black and white audiences, tradition and experimentation. Blind since childhood, he transformed limitation into instinct, building a career that valued feeling over form. The lesson revealed after his death is not about innovation alone, but about accountability amid abundance. Ray fathered 12 children and lived a life defined by motion, touring, recording, composing, often at a pace that complicated family stability. In his later years, legal documents revealed detailed estate planning that attempted to provide for his children equitably, acknowledging obligations many artists postpone. This preparation contrasted with the chaos that followed other legends' passings and underscored a deliberate effort to manage legacy responsibly. Health challenges eventually slowed him. After decades of work, Ray faced liver disease and declining stamina, yet remained creatively engaged. He continued recording and collaborating, prioritizing craft even as physical limits emerged. When he died in 2004 at age 73, the response celebrated influence, but also surfaced questions about balance, how genius coexists with responsibility. Posthumous discussions revisited Ray's complexities, his brilliance, his contradictions, his discipline. Unlike myths that sanitize icons, Ray's story invites a fuller view. Greatness paired with planning, freedom tempered by foresight. His catalog endures not only because it innovated, but because it was stewarded. Ray Charles's legacy teaches a pragmatic lesson often overlooked in art. Vision must be matched with structure. Inspiration can move culture, but intention sustains it. By preparing for the end as carefully as he shaped the sound, Ray ensured that what he built would continue, clear, contested, and unmistakably his. Their voices changed music forever, but their final lessons came at a price no fame could prevent. Illness, silence, pressure, neglect. Each story forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Success does not guarantee safety, peace, or protection. Some legends were celebrated too late. Others were misunderstood until it was too late. So here's the question. Should we remember them only for the music, or also for the warnings their lives left behind? Share your honest opinion in the comments. Your voice matters here. This is Black Excellence Legends, where legacy is more than applause.